It's a nonpartisan committee that's part of the student government on campus. And she also has been a precinct chair for the Rice County DFL. And another thing that she forgot to mention in her biography is that she was trained, was that last year? To be a moderator by the League of Women.
I actually did that my freshman year of college.
Freshman year? Oh, what time goes by way too fast. She went to moderator training to moderate forums, just like the people that stood up here this morning. That was her first taste of League of Women Voters. She's also spent the last 2 summers in Washington, D.C. On internships. She worked the summer after her freshman year on Senator Tim Walz's campaign as a volunteer. And she, this fall, worked with the Northfield League of Women Voters to help educate high school students about the voting process. So she would like to, gee, after all that, guess what she wants to do when she graduates? She would like to pursue a career, hopefully in Washington, D.C., in government and public service. And because of a very thoughtful aunt who gave her an honorary membership, she is a League of Women Voters member now. I would like to introduce my niece, Alyssa Berg.
After the debate moderator training that I took freshman year, I got a League of Women Voters pin. Somebody else was mentioning the red buttons, the badges, and I've had it on my backpack for all 4 years at St. Olaf, and it sparks conversation often, and it went with me to both trips to Washington and abroad to Scotland, so that League of Women Voters button is well traveled. Yes, so after all that, I joined the League thanks to my aunt. So thank you so much for having me today. I'm thrilled to be here to speak to all of you about engaging young adults in the democratic process. As a young person who's interested in making public service my vocation, this topic is very, very important to me. And I'm extremely excited to see the League engaging and committing in this way to reaching young adults. It is an honor to be asked to speak, and my pleasure to be here. So before we get started with our overall discussion, there's a word that I want to introduce to you that will kind of help us focus what we're going to talk about today. And that word is millennials. I'm sure, sounds like you've heard it before, which is a good thing. Many people haven't. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with terms like baby boomers and Generation X or Gen X. But when we're talking about millennials, we're talking about people who come after those Gen Xers. Sometimes this group is referred to as Generation Y, but the more popular term, and the one that I think that most people my age identify with most strongly, is millennials. So the millennial generation can be defined by a few parameters. Either it's those born between 1980 and 2000, or as those currently today under the age of 30. So in simpler terms, millennials refers to anyone who is now, today in 2015, between the ages of 15 to about 30 to 35. In political statistics, sometimes we reduce this to 18 to 29 because that kind of focuses us in on people who are of voting age. So as we talk about engaging young adults in the democratic process today, millennials are the people that we're talking about, and they're the people that we're most interested in. So as we go, we'll talk more about the characteristics of the millennial generation and kind of what makes us tick. So getting back to politics, as I'm sure that many of you already know from your work with the League registering voters and trying to engage people to get involved with the democratic process, young people between the ages of 18 and 29 exhibit the lowest voter turnout rates of anybody in the nation. 68% of us are registered to vote, but it's a lot harder to get that many people to the polls. Here in Minnesota, we do okay. In the last presidential election in 2012, we had about 58% of our state's 18 to 29-year-olds at the voting polls, so that's pretty good. But the national average does not stack up as well. In 2012, just 45% of young people nationwide voted, and in the midterm elections, that percentage falls even lower. So early estimates from this fall for the 2014 elections put it at about 22% of millennials voting. That leaves 78% of people away from the polls. So in comparison to that 22% statistic, these These are some other statistics about the millennial generation. 36% of people in that same 18 to 29-year-old age group have at least one child. 42% have student loan debt. 56% are working in paid employment of some sort. 70% make use of a mode of transportation other than a car to get to where they're going. 76% have health insurance, and 94% of 18 to 29-year-olds use the internet. Surprise, surprise, right? So on the surface, those statistics don't really seem to have that much to do with that low voter turnout percentage that we looked at. And millennials don't really think they have a lot of relationship either. But this fall, I partnered with a wonderful member of the Northfield League of Women Voters, Bonnie Jean Flom. I'm not sure, maybe you've met her at various state events. But we went to speak to seniors at Northfield High School about the importance of voting. And let me tell you that at 8 a.m. on a Friday morning, the last thing that 18-year-olds are interested in is having somebody come into their classroom and say, I love politics and you should too, are you registered to vote? They're not really focused on that. A lot of them looked like they'd woken up about 10 minutes before, hardly made it out the door, fought with mom, barely made it in their desks by the bell, and they didn't seem very interested in learning about what we had to say about voting. So we took a little bit of a different approach to talk to them and get them engaged. Bonnie Jean introduced the league and kind of told them what we were all about. And then I got up in front of them and I said, okay, I'm going to ask you a few questions. I said, I want you to raise your hand if you're registered to vote. I want you to raise your hand if you feel like your vote counts. I want you to raise your hand if you feel like you have control over what happens in Washington. I want you to raise your hand if you care about issues like taxes, health insurance, loan rates, and foreign policy. And I want you to raise your hand if you feel like your state, local, and national representatives care about what you as an 18-year-old think. Nothing. Not a single hand went up, and many phones came out under desks, and no one was listening. So then I tried a few other questions to see if I could get them thinking. I asked, how many of you drove a car to school today? Now, how many of you care how much the gas that you put into that car costs? How many of you work a part-time job after school? How many of you care how much you get paid when you work that job? How many of you want to go to college? And how many of you want to be able to pay for that college tuition once you're accepted to go? And just about every hand in the room went up for at least one of those questions, if not all three. And suddenly, those sleepy seniors did not look so bored anymore. From there, we were able to open the door to having a discussion about how elected officials at the local, state, and national level are the ones with the power to affect major aspects of these young people's lives, and how young people have the power to choose officials who represent their interests, but only if they vote. According to the US Census Bureau, millennials make up 21% of eligible voters, but they only comprise 15% of the actual votes cast. As young people today, we are cheating ourselves out of our voice and our vote. I concluded my time with the sleepy seniors of Northfield High School by putting us all in the same boat. Sure, I'm 22 and they're 18, but we are all millennials, and we are all falling down on the job. Sure, it's easy to complain that the grown-ups in government don't really care about what we think, but I wanted them to think about why should they? Why should they care about what we think? If we don't show that we care about the decisions they're making, why should they listen to what we want? People ages 45 to 64 make up only 36% of eligible voters, but they comprise nearly 40% of all votes cast. Now to me, that sounds like you're showing that you have a vested interest in what happens in your city, your state, and your country. So who is a legislator going to listen to? Millennials who can't be bothered to vote, or their parents and grandparents who make civic engagement a priority? Now that's not to say that my parents don't have great ideas about how the nation should be run, and that all of you don't either. You do, and my parents do. But so do millennials. If we're willing to listen to them, encourage them to participate, and value their ideas. And this brings me to my next point, which is ownership. Ownership. Now I don't really have any statistics or studies to back this point up, but I think that it's my experience as a millennial that our introduction to civic engagement and political participation has been characterized by a distinct sense of inevitability and a lack of control and ownership over what happens to us. If we think back to the parameters of the millennial generation, you'll remember that the youngest of us were born no later than the year 2000. This means that the millennial generation is split in much the same way that we define the most recent era of our nation's history, pre and post 9/11. For many of us, the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001 were our first introduction to the world of government and politics. I was in 3rd grade when 9/11 happened, and that was the year that we grew up. That was the year that we realized that adults are not infallible, that there are some things that the president can't control, and that there are things that our parents could not protect us from. We were introduced to the concept of the national government with questions like, what will happen to America now? Are we safe here? And who will decide what is best for our country? My 3rd grade class wrote letters to President George W. Bush, my very first act of civic engagement. And we wrote them, I was talking to my mom about this last night, we wrote them on that type of paper that you use in elementary school that's half picture and half lines, and it had the printing line in the middle, so we were still learning how to write our letters properly, and we were writing to the president about an act of terrorism, which is an incredible juxtaposition. And I think that speaks a lot to our engagement and our first sense of civic duty. At the age of 9, we were civically engaged, whether we liked it or not, and the whole country was. And we didn't really have much choice in the matter. So throughout our lives, a sense of inevitable lack of control has continued to color our experience with government. We've watched as the war of our childhood has become a war fought by our classmates. We've watched as our college funds were reduced to pocket change in the financial collapse of 2008, and we've watched our study hours turn to work hours as we attempt to pay rising tuition costs, so that maybe we can get a job after college, though we're told that they're few and far between. Now, this isn't meant to be a sob story. Heaven knows that generations coming before us have had their fair share of struggles as well. But I do think that for the millennial generation, one of the most important things that we can do to get them engaged is to instill in them a sense of ownership in the democratic process and of control over what happens in their government. Young people today, and students especially, I think, are too likely to see politics as kind of an adult's game. It's something for people our parents' age or our grandparents' age, rather than something that we think that we're qualified to have an opinion on. What does a 20-year-old know about foreign policy, about Social Security, about financial policy? But actually, it's quite a lot if we let them lead. Last summer, I had the unique opportunity to get involved with an organization called Common Sense Action while working as an intern in Washington, D.C. Common Sense Action, or CSA, operates as a branch of the Bipartisan Policy Center, which is one of D.C.'s top advocacy organizations, and was started by a summer intern at the BPC with big ideas. Sam Gilman, the founder and CEO of Common Sense Action, is a senior at Brown University this year. He's the same age that I am. And the rest of the CSA executive board is comprised of young people ranging in age from sophomores in college to graduate students, and no one on the executive board of Common Sense Action is over the age of 24. Since its establishment in 2012, CSA has established 40 chapters on colleges in 20 different states. Its founders have published a 72-page policy agenda offering reasonable and well-researched solutions intended to help lawmakers advance generational fairness, invest in millennial mobility, and repair politics. The movement has gained the support of political heavy hitters like former Senator Olympia Snowe and former Congressman Charlie Gonzalez, and CSA has gained nationwide recognition as its members have submitted op-ed pieces to state and national newspapers, lobbied for CSA's policy plan in the offices of congressmen and senators, and co-authored reports on the impact of today's political decisions on the millennial generation. However, what I found most important, what I found most important as a member of CSA was the sense of empowerment that came from being allowed to lead. Throughout the summer, CSA hosted weekly policy meetings that were open to any and every young person who wanted to attend. No closed doors, no wrong ideas, and most importantly, no grown-up at the head of the table steering us one way or the other. Now, I know that that sounds a little bit silly, and I'm the first to advocate that young adults should listen to the generations that have come before them and learn from those generations, because there are some amazing minds in politics today. But what I'm getting at here is that this was an open forum for millennials, by millennials, and about what millennials need. Now, when you got in this room with all of these students who were having these discussions and just this amazing energy flowing between them, you would be amazed at the productivity and the creativity that arose from those discussions. I mean, we're talking about conservatives and liberals together, policy wonks, and kids who are just joining for the first time into political organizations. These are people interning at the White House, other people working at after-school art programs, people who are from diverse ideologies, diverse backgrounds, and diverse sets of interests, sitting together in a room debating what is best for our generation, and doing so with respect and with cooperation, which I have to say is more than can be said for many governing bodies at the state, local, and national level in our country today. This was cooperation, it was commitment, it was energy, and it was real progress being made at these meetings. And this was all without someone sitting at the head of the table, passing on the rules of the game and steering us towards one party line or another. I interviewed for an internship earlier this week, and one of the questions that I was asked was to tell them about a time that was most exciting to me, the most exciting political experience that I had had, whether it be in an internship with an organization, a leadership position. Now, I'm involved, as my aunt said in the introduction, in a lot of exciting leadership positions on my campus. I'm president of College Democrats. I serve on the SGA political branch, which is student government, and I'm a precinct chair in the Rice County DFL. I'm involved with the league. There are so many exciting opportunities on my campus and in my community. But the first thing that came to my mind when asked that question was being part of Common Sense Action, because it instilled in me and in my fellow millennials who attended those meetings a sense of ownership in the political process. It taught me that it's okay to think of solutions that fall entirely outside the bounds of both parties' ideologies. It taught me that young people have the ability to transcend the divisions that plague our democratic system today, and it taught me that we don't have to be bound by the norms and conventions of politics as usual. Some of the strongest voices in the American media today, including the Huffington Post, the New York Times, and the Atlantic, have taken to calling us the do-nothing generation, or the go-nowhere generation, or my personal favorite, Generation Nothing. But let me tell you that this is far from the reality of what I have experienced as a young person involved in public service. When millennials are empowered to feel that our ideas matter and that we have a stake in our future and our government, we have the opportunity to lead, it instills in us a sense of confidence, a sense of commitment, and most importantly, a sense of ownership. So, how do we make this happen on a smaller scale, community basis, like say with the League here in Minnesota? I think we need to start by meeting young people right where they're at. So first, we have to get them to participate. As we talked about before, making issues relevant to young people and demonstrating that they have the power to impact political decision-making is absolutely key. But another important aspect of motivating young people to get involved in community initiatives, in campaigns, and in the democratic process in general is to make sure that they feel that their time is being well spent and that they are contributing in a meaningful way. So to do this, you have to reach us, you have to teach us, and you have to trust us. Throughout my experience with both campus and community organizing, it has become increasingly clear to me that there is a generational divide in the way that we communicate. Millennials today like to look to tools like email and texting and Facebook messaging to communicate one-on-one, and we look to platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook to learn more about news and events. In order to reach young people, it is essential to make use of these tools and to make use of them effectively. Now, I'm not an expert on digital communication, but I can tell you from experience with event planning through College Democrats and other student organizations that it's imperative to deliver information about events to young people on a variety of platforms. So if you send them an email about an event, make sure that you post the same information on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and I check each of these platforms multiple times a day. I look at them when I get up. They're the last thing I look at before I go to bed. I check throughout the day, and most of my friends do the same. If you put the information everywhere, we can't miss it. In 2010, the National League of Women Voters created a Twitter account and has posted 16,600 tweets over the last 5 years. Now, that's a lot of information. You don't have to post quite that much, but making use of social media platforms to spread the word in a way that ensures that we'll see it is extremely helpful. And if you don't know how to use social media, ask. I am certain that many of the millennials in your life would be more than willing to sit down for a few hours and show you how Instagram works, show you how Twitter works, show you how Facebook works. We are more than happy to share that information with you, and it's not hard. Anyone can do it, I promise. Additionally, make sure that your content matches. If there's a poster going up on campus about an event, first of all, make sure that it's clear and concise and eye-catching, and make sure that the same images from the poster are included on the social media posts that you use. Students are often juggling many campus events and many various commitments at different types of events and meetings, and if your images coordinate and your information coordinates in all the places that they see it, it helps your event stand out in our minds. On the more personal side, if you're working with a millennial one-on-one, my advice is to get comfortable with texting. Almost all young people have cell phones, but many are also uncomfortable talking on the phone, which seems silly. I really like to talk on the phone, but even those of us who like to talk on the phone are more likely to respond to a text message as we're walking between classes, as we're going in and out of a meeting, or things like that. So if you text us, you'll hear back much sooner because it's easy to communicate via texting on the go. Now, that's not to say that talking on the phone is worthless. Obviously, it's best to talk on the phone in certain circumstances. But for small details and questions, just shoot us a text. Also, keep in mind that student schedules don't always match with the typical workday schedule. So during the election this fall, College Democrats, we were working with several community organizers in Northfield, and we became increasingly frustrated with one another as we tried to coordinate times to talk on the phone, because I wanted to talk on the phone in the evening because I was in class all throughout the day, and by the time I wanted to talk on the phone in the evening, they had gone home from the office, and they couldn't understand why I couldn't talk at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or And by the time we did finally coordinate with one another to get on the phone, it was information that could have been just as easily passed through an email or a text message, and we would have avoided all of that frustration and coordination. So that's important to keep in mind. And if you're establishing connections with a young person with whom you're going to be working and communicating with frequently about a project or an event, make sure that you tell them that you text. Most of us will assume that you don't, but we'll be thrilled to find out that you do. And if we need to speak to you by phone, which we all know is sometimes the case, make sure that you schedule with us in a way that keeps in mind that young people have very flexible schedules that are often different than those of people in the workplace. Next, teach us. This applies more to millennials of high school and college age, because students are often looking not only to get involved for the sake of helping out, but also to gain transferable skills that can be used later in leadership positions, in internships, in jobs, etc. Now, this might sound a little bit self-interested, and it is kind of on our part, but it's also a good thing for you, because I know that when I'm working on a project that's also teaching me something that I'm learning for the first time, and that I can use later, I'm likely to work even harder, to devote more time to it, to really try to sink my teeth in and figure it out. And I'm likely to seek feedback and constructive criticism for my work. I really care about that work, and I find it really worth my time. Each year, St. Olaf organizes an event called Day at the Capitol, and this event allows students the opportunity to lobby at the state capitol on behalf of the interests of private college students. So in the morning, we load everybody on a bus, we take them to the state capitol, and then in the morning, while they're there, they receive a short training on the lobbying process. So what type of information to present, how to do a lit drop when you're done, how to talk to somebody who is in a position like a state senator or a state representative. And then from there, we send them off to meetings, and they meet with state senators and state representatives, all on their own with no oversight, supervision. We let them try it out. And this is obviously a very popular event with students who are interested in politics and government, because this is a very transferable skill. but it also attracts students who would be otherwise unlikely to engage with a political event because it teaches them a skill that they can then take back to their own student organizations, whether they be arts organizations or people lobbying on behalf of healthcare reform or whatever their interests may be, non-political included. They can take that skill back, teach it to their members and their organization on campus, and then they can go and lobby on behalf of their own interests. So this is an example of both getting students involved in an event and also teaching them a transferable skill. One, partnering with young people, make the work you're asking them to do meaningful and worthwhile, and help them see how it's going to relate to their future goals and their future plans. That being said, once you've taught us, trust us. A few years ago, I was asked to help a community organizer get the word out to students about an initiative that our community was working on via email. And it was asking for the students to engage in expressing public support of this initiative. The organizer sent me all the information in a rough draft, in a way that was kind of jumbled and, just kind of an information dump. And then they asked me to put it into student speak and to organize the email in a way that would inspire students to act without bogging them down with information. Now, I was asked to do this task because, as president of College Democrats, I had proven experience with effectively reaching students in this manner. I knew what I was doing. I had shown that I could do it before. So I took the information given to me, and I spent a great deal of time working it into a format that I knew students would pay attention to without leaving out any important information. And then to test it out, I sent it to some fellow students on my campus who were familiar with the issue, familiar with the community, and then I sent it to a couple of students who go to different colleges in different states to see if it was accessible for students who had no background knowledge of this issue whatsoever. And when I was confident in my work and satisfied with what I had produced, I sent it back to the organizer, only to have it returned to me the next day, completely rewritten, completely changed, tweaked a little bit, in a way that was much more suited to a monthly newsletter or something that you would be given as a handout at a meeting, not something that was going to engage students. Now, it was hard for me not to feel like this was a waste of my time, and also that this organizer did not trust me to complete a task for which they had specifically enlisted me based on an exhibited skill set. As we talked about earlier, to engage millennials, it is essential to instill in them a sense of ownership and to value their input. When working with millennials, and with students especially, trusting them is an essential part of this process. On a broader note, another essential element to engaging millennials is to encourage us. Since deciding to pursue a major in political science and a career in public service, the following interaction has occurred more times than I can count. I'll be with a family friend or an acquaintance or talking to the Herberger's checkout woman or something like that. It's always with an adult and somebody older than me. And we'll be having this really great conversation where I introduce myself, we're having this nice back and forth. And then we get to the question where they ask me, so what do you want to do after college? What are you going to do after you graduate? And I say, well, I'm a political science major and I love it. I'm so excited about it. I want to move to Washington and I want to work in government and I want to work in politics and public service and I can't wait. And I watch their faces fall. And I cannot tell you how often I get the response, ugh, why would you want to do that? It's just, I hate politics. I kid you not, people will look a 22-year-old kid about to graduate college and pursue her dreams, who is clearly passionate about public service. They will look me in the eye and respond with disgust to what I want to do as a vocation. Now, I'm not to be deterred from my goals. I take this as an opportunity, and I know that my parents do as well when they talk to family friends and things like that about what I want to do after college. We take this as an opportunity to explain to people that I'm passionate about bringing bipartisanship and cooperation back into politics. But on some level, I am also justifying my career choice because it is one that literally disgusts adults when I tell them my plans. And still, we wonder why we get the same old tired ideas of gridlock and arguments and corruption in government. We are not encouraging young people to make careers out of politics and government. And we're not supporting them as they try to pursue these vocations. As I said, I am not to be deterred, but even I start to get a little bit discouraged when this response happens over and over and over again. And there are other things that deter millennials from pursuing public service as well. Worries about student loans, about job security, about living off our parents' dimes after graduation plays a major, major role in what we choose to do after we graduate. These are all completely valid, and for many students, myself included, very, very real concerns, and very unavoidable ones. However, all too often, I think that students are scared out of their conviction for public service and persuaded instead to pursue fields that may not fit their passions, but will surely pay their bills. Now, throughout my time at college, I have watched seniors in my political science classes proudly tell the class on the first day that they are interested and committing to pursuing a job advocating for education reform, or working at the State Department, or joining a congressional office after graduation. And by the end of the term, they are skipping that same class about which they were passionate in order to participate in corporate recruiting interviews with management consulting companies, with financial firms, and other types of things like that. Now, I'm not saying that these jobs are not working for everyone or that they're wrong for everyone. I have also seen many friends who are brilliant students interested in economics and management and business get an amazing starting career with positions like these. These companies also offer great starting salaries, they offer benefits packages, and they offer security. I really don't blame students for considering it, but is this really where we want students interested in public service to be headed? In 2011, Yale senior Marina Keegan published an article in the Yale Daily News entitled, "Even Artichokes Have Doubts," which detailed, it's a good title, catchy for sure. And in that article, she detailed the same phenomenon amongst her friends who had once expressed dreams of creating art, of becoming teachers, or working at nonprofits. Increasingly, Keegan observed that her friends saw their passions as risks and chose to leave them behind in favor of private sector corporate positions. Keegan was killed in a car accident just days after her graduation from Yale, but her ideas live on in a volume of her writing that's called The Opposite of Loneliness, that was published posthumously by her parents, and it includes this article and several others that encourage millennials to pursue vocations for which they have true passion and conviction. And I could not agree more with Marina Keegan's advice. But millennials pursuing public service can use your help in making these career choices and even non-vocational volunteer involvement feasible and attainable. While many adults respond to my vocational plans with disdain, others have enabled me to pursue these passions and have helped to propel me to where I am today. They have invited me to participate in community organizing events that have allowed me to meet local, state, and national leaders. They have helped me make connections by sharing their network of friends and colleagues so that I could meet with those who really work in public service and so that I could learn more about that field. They have written letters of recommendation on my behalf as I apply for jobs and internships, and they have asked me to help with projects that have allowed me to develop new skills and abilities. And they have even offered to host me in their homes so that I could afford to pursue unpaid internships in Washington, D.C. to get the experience that I need. Because of support and encouragement from people like all of you here today, I feel confident in my choice to pursue public service after graduation. And I'm excited to tell people about my plans no matter what response I get afterwards. So if you have the means, the connections, the opportunity to encourage individual young people that you know in your community to follow their passions for public service and to support them as they try, do it. Please, please, please do it, because your help is invaluable to us as we get our start. Throughout my experiences as an intern and as a campus leader, a few experiences stand out as times when I have reached the end of a truly just incredible day and looked around and thought, I cannot believe that I get to be a part of all this going on here today. Last year, the College Democrats turned out a crowd of over 200 people when Senator Al Franken visited our campus. I got to meet Nancy Pelosi at a campaign event in the Twin Cities a few years ago, and I sat on the floor in a packed court chamber as Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg spoke to a room full of young women just getting started in Washington, D.C. and encouraged us to pursue our dreams. What incredible places to find oneself. But the fact that I was present at these events at all stands as a testament to the value of engaging young adults in the democratic process. I only know the information that I'm presenting to you here today because someone else did those things for me. Someone empowered me with an understanding of civic duty. Someone reached me with information about how to get involved, and someone taught me in a way that encouraged me to work hard and to try my best. Someone trusted me to think creatively and to have confidence in the quality of my work. Someone encouraged me to believe in the validity of my pursuit of public service as a vocation, and someone supported me as I pursued the first steps toward a career in government so that I could focus on doing my best. And because people throughout my young adult life have invested time and energy in me and my goals, I have been empowered to take ownership over my influence in the democratic process through voting, volunteering, and working to empower other millennials to do exactly the same. When we invest in millennials and empower them in ways that I've talked about here today, we instill in them an understanding of the value of public service, whether it be as a career or through volunteer work, and that will stay with them for a lifetime. So as you work with millennials in the future, I encourage you to reach them, teach them, trust them, encourage them, and support them. And in doing so, you will empower the next generation of public servants and inspire them, by example, to engage with enthusiasm, with commitment, and with passion in the democratic process. Thank you.
So if you have any questions?
I have a comment to make. When I get that kind of response from people sometimes, you know, like you
Yeah.
in the store, I really want to say, I bet you only watch Fox News.
You know, oddly enough, it comes from people who I know are staunch liberals, staunch Republicans, staunch. It comes from everybody. It comes from people that I had assumed were committed to making real change in their communities, and people just have this idea that like Washington is dirty and no one should go there and everyone's corrupt, and that has not been my experience there. And maybe it's, you know, the naive eyes of a 22-year-old, but I really do think that there's the opportunity and people there committed to actually working towards change, because I've seen it in fellow millennials, and I think that it's important to keep it going. Yeah.
I was going to comment on that also, but I've come across the same thing, especially when I've been out campaigning. And what I will usually do when they say, oh, I don't vote and I don't get involved in politics, is I will ask them, like, for instance, this last election, and I talked to a woman in a low-income housing with 3 children. And I said, well, do you like the fact that minimum wage was raised? Oh, yeah. I said, do you like the fact that you can get scholarships now to send your children to preschool? Do you like the fact that schools are fully funded, so your children have the opportunity to go to college, have a chance to go to college?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I like all of that. And then I'll usually say, well, guess what? You're political. Are you going to vote? Keep those things.
Exactly. That's like.
So I'll question them back
Yeah.
on the issues that would pertain, that I think would pertain to them.
And I think
when they
that
say
that
yes,
applies
that you,
across from, I mean, that's what I was trying to get at with talking to the seniors at Northfield High School by saying, do you care about how much your gas costs? Do you care about how much you get paid at your job? And I think that that works not just for millennials, but for anybody that you encounter who is just, you know, had it with politics.
gotta
And
find their need.
people, I think, forget that it touches every aspect of our lives, and I think you can't be involved in any sort of anything without having politics have some impact on your life. It's the food you eat, it's the gas you put in your car, it's the roads you drive on. I mean, it is central to every aspect of our lives. So why not be involved in it and have a say? Yeah.
What organizations or opportunities were there or are there at St. Olaf that you feel are ones that are places where we could, in this community, like St. Cloud State, St.
Sure.
Ben's, St. John, get into that would get us a foot in the door and
Yeah.
how to do it?
So I think that college Democrats groups are a really good way, just because they just because millennials and I think kids who are just starting to get interested in politics, especially in college, tend to lean quite liberal oftentimes, depending on where you are in the country and in the state, obviously, but College Democrats groups, and I can only speak from that experience as being part of College Democrats, tend to be very receptive to the goals of the league in, you know, encouraging everyone to participate, making sure that everyone's rights are protected in terms of voting. So College Democrats are a good way to get in. It's also good to go in through student government associations, because I think that oftentimes, while organizations, like independent organizations on campus of students like College Democrats, often work with the community to, you know, kind of establish themselves, student government associations tend to be very within the college. They tend to be very kind of, they only work on the college campus. They don't get out into the community very much, but there are a lot of inroads there because they hold a lot of power and a lot of sway among students. So if there's a political, so at St. Olaf we have the political awareness branch of student government called PAC. It's kind of clever because it's like a PAC. And so that's how we connect with students about politics. And often student governments are also nonpartisan, which aligns very well with the league's motivation in being, you know, non-exclusionary towards anybody of any ideology. So PAC for us is a nonpartisan organization. So around election time, we do, like this year I wrote a pamphlet that gave information and short bios on each of the candidates running for each office from every party, everybody who's going to be on the ballot, so that students could have all of it right there in front of them and be informed, because the most important, or the most frequent thing, and the most important to us as we try to address it, thing that we hear from students is, well, I'm not going to vote because I'm not informed. Like, well, you can be, there's nothing stopping you, let's get it out there, let's get the information out. And I think that the league can be very instrumental, especially around election times, in partnering with groups on campus that are trying to get candidate info out. I know that you guys, some league chapters do like the paper voter guide that goes out to the community and things like that, so partnering with campuses to get that information on campus to students and through College Democrats groups, College Republicans groups, and through the political branches of student government associations, for sure. And also hosting events on campus. So we had that debate moderator training my freshman year, and that had a huge turnout of people, and that was how I found out that many of my professors were league members, and many community members that I knew who were on campus for other various reasons were members of the league, and there were people that I could go to and ask about how to become a member or how to get involved with the league. So, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, you got my vote.
Alyssa, I learned from your mom that an advanced placement class as a senior really made a difference for you. So I'm very interested in the senior component of all this. When young people like get piqued by ideas having to do with government or politics, you know, it has to happen somehow in some context.
So my senior year of high school, I took AP Government because everybody who's a senior has to take a civics class of some sort, and you can take AP or you can take just regular, you know, student civics, and then part of that is an econ component as well. And I remember taking the first like couple months of AP Government and starting to like learn terms that I had never heard before, except for like on NPR when my parents were getting ready for work in the morning. And all of a sudden, like these reports that used to sound like foreign language were like, oh my gosh, I know what that is. I have read about that. Like, I get that. I know what they're talking about. And it sort of, I remember feeling like it just opened this entire new world that it was like learning a new language. Suddenly, like all of this stuff made sense to me and I had access to that part of like the civic community. Like I had access to it because somebody had taught me what these words meant, how these processes worked. And a huge part of that was my AP Government teacher, Mr. Urban, who was very good at making us feel that it was important to know these things and that they were essential parts of becoming an adult, to know how Congress works, to know how voting works, to know the history of those things. So that was where I learned about the League of Women Voters, because I learned that the first televised debate was hosted by the League of Women Voters, and that's still my primary association is like the League and televised debates. That instilled in me and my classmates, including classmates who had absolutely no interest and who in government and who had gone on still today to be like English majors. I have some friends who are English majors or science majors who still count that class amongst the most important that they took in high school, because it opened that door to them to sort of participating fully because they were empowered with understanding of how the process works. One of the things in that class that really got me inspired and excited to be involved was that we got extra credit for going to things like congressional debates. And so I went to my first congressional debate in September, because it was an election year, because I needed extra credit. I had done poorly on the first assignment. I was like, okay, I have to make it up. I have to go to this thing, and I don't really care what it is, but I got there. And it was a candidate forum hosted by the League with Congressman Tim Walz and his opponent that year, who was Randy Demmer. And that was the first time, and I remember I just took copious notes, like so many notes. I wrote down everything they said, and then I started watching, okay, well, who came with them? Who are do they have staff people with them? Do they take questions afterwards? And I ended up at the end of that year calling Tim Walz's office and asking if I could be a campaign intern, if I could come in and volunteer. And I did that for 2 summers, and then went to intern for him in Washington, and that led to where I am now. So giving students kind of sometimes it takes, especially I think with high school students, kind of a practical motivator, you get extra credit if you go to this thing, and I think if you give them the tools to understand it and the motivation to get there, then the rest takes off from them. And I think that is a major component to getting them to be involved later on in life, because it opens that door early.
I'd like to thank you for reaching out to older people, because I think I have 2 daughters and they're very busy with their lives, and there's an enormous amount of power that could be pulled together by having the millennials and the boomers and beyond working in concert.
Absolutely.
And I am very interested in that. I'm concerned about the college tuition stuff because my daughters have huge debt.
Yeah.
It's not just a single generation interest. It fans out.
It really does. Absolutely. I think, like I mentioned, that there's a big divide in how we communicate with one another, but I don't think that has to extend to division in ideology or priorities. I think if we can get talking, if you can get on campuses and engaged, I didn't know Bonnie Jean Flom before this year, but she came onto my campus and said, I've heard about you and I want to get to know you. I know other students, they've told me about you. Let's get lunch, let's talk, let's go to coffee every month so that I can learn about what you're doing and you can tell what I'm doing. And we do, and we talk about it. And I turned to her when I need advice about, how best to make something work on campus or how to connect with the Northfield community. The same thing happened my freshman year when I went to be a caucus volunteer for the Rice County DFL, and all of a sudden there were all of these people who were like, a student, a kid, hey, come do stuff with us, come along, we want you to be part of it. And there is risk in that, though, that then you're sort of reduced to the token student voice on the committee, which that's not really empowering. That's kind of you're only valuable insofar as you speak for students. So once you've got students, bring them into the conversation, and if you've got, a young person on your committee, don't make them the token young person. Make them you are here speaking with us, bringing your ideas just as we are, and bridging that communication and empowering them through validating ideas and encouraging them to participate. I think there's a lot more commonalities than we think there are between generations, and you're right, an untapped source of, really great energy to get things working towards change. Yeah.
So today we can develop relationships across Twitter and Facebook, etc., with individuals and organizations, as individuals and as an organization, each doing our own thing.
Right.
But down the road, then that is really the bridge to the next step, where you really are an active part of organizations like the League of Women Voters.
Absolutely.
When you have a little time.
Right. And I understand that sometimes, when I say text us or email us or use Facebook, that feels impersonal to some people. I think it feels like not real engagement. It feels like you're just sort of putting something out there and maybe somebody sees it. But I think that millennials see it very differently because that's the norm for us, and it doesn't feel, you know, I have friends across the country going to different colleges, friends across the world that I met on study abroad that I text all the time. I Facebook message them all the time. I talk to them. They are an active part of my life because I can connect with them instantaneously via technology. And those relationships don't feel artificial or false to me. They feel like they're something that's part of my life. And I think that if you get, it feels weird, I'm sure, at first, but if you get used to communicating, like using Twitter, using Instagram, that feels like a seamless integration into our life and how we get information. And I think that it's essential to start out, to at least incorporate that as a component of your interactions with young people. And I think then that it empowers them and encourages them to become more comfortable with, you know, calling you up on the phone and saying, I know we have Facebook message, but I really just need to talk to you about this thing. Or, you know, like, it fosters those relationships in the early stages, I think, in a way that's accessible for us. Yeah.
I will back you up there. As a baby boomer, I could not live without Facebook or Twitter. It actually, you can build such a strong power base. You know what other state governments, politicians, what ideas from around the world, all different types of organizations from everywhere. You get so many different ideas, and it empowers you, and it helps you to build a really good, strong power base.
Yeah.
If you use it right. I couldn't work without it.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's just getting used to using it in a way that's integrated with the other ways.
So if anybody needs help getting on there, I can help.
Yes,
them.
and I stand by that line, seriously. If you don't know like what some of those things are, if you don't know how to use them, like call your nieces or your nephews or your grandkids and be like, hey, can you teach me next Christmas? Like, we sit down for an hour and look at Facebook, because they will totally do it. They will be like, Grandma, let's use Facebook, this is great. Like, people think it's fun. They'll want to get you involved with it. It is a great way to communicate. A lot of my friends have extended family members from all generations that they keep up with on Facebook, and it's a great tool, for sure.
Alyssa, tell them about your great aunt Helen.
Oh, yes.
If anyone thinks they're too old to learn how to do Facebook.
Yes, so my great aunt Helen and Linda and my dad's aunt is 92, 94. She's
Early 90s.
hitting early 90s, and she likes everything I post on Facebook. She posts to my wall. She comments, and like she'll Facebook message me during the election this fall and be like, saw that you were out registering voters. Keep up the good fight. I'm thinking of you. Like, you know, like she offers encouragement, and she FaceTimes. She like video chats. I mean, it's great, and that's a testament to the fact that it doesn't have to be a generational divide. It's totally able to cross boundaries of generation. Yeah. Anything else?
Anybody else? Thank you.